Welcome back to BeFM Drama and the final episode in our production of The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In this episode, we return to the office of Sherlock Holmes, where he and Dr. Watson have been listening in rapt attention to the story of Victor Hatherley, a young hydraulic engineer who was offered a suspiciously high fee by a sinister colonel to examine a hydraulic press in a remote country house in the dead of night. The machine was supposedly being used to compress bricks of fuller's earth, a useful resource in the industrial processes of Victorian England. When Hatherley examined the machine, however, he realized it was being used for some entirely more sinister purpose. Having roused the colonel's anger with his curiosity, the engineer twice narrowly escaped death with the help of a mysterious woman. First, when the colonel locked him into the active hydraulic press in an attempt to crush him, and again when the colonel attacked the fleeing engineer with a cleaver, cutting off the man's left thumb. Hatherley has just recounted his story to Holmes and Watson, who must now move quickly in an attempt to apprehend the criminals. Join me, your host, Joshua Cornwell, as I take the role of Dr. Watson in this exciting final episode of The Engineer's Thumb. We both sat in silence for some time after Victor Hatherley finished his extraordinary narrative. Then Sherlock Holmes got up and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down one of the folders where he kept his newspaper clippings.
Here's an item which will interest you. It appeared in all the papers about a year ago. Listen to this. Lost. On the 9th, Mr. Jeremiah Hayling, aged 26, a hydraulic engineer, left his lodgings at 10 o'clock at night and has not been heard of since. Was dressed in, etc., etc. Ha! That represents the last time that the colonel needed to have his machine overhauled, I fancy.
Good heavens, that explains what the girl said.
Undoubtedly. It is quite clear that this colonel is a cool and desperate man, absolutely determined that nothing should stand in the way of his little game. He's like one of those pirates who leave no survivors from a captured ship simply out of habit, need or no need. Every moment now is precious. If you feel up to it, Mr. Hatherley, we shall go to Scotland Yard at once as a preparation for our journey to Iford.
Some 3 hours later, we were all in the train together, bound from Reading to the little Berkshire village. There was Sherlock Holmes, Hatherley, Inspector Bradstreet of Scotland Yard, and myself. Bradstreet had spread an army map of the county out on the seat and was busy with his compasses, drawing a circle with Iford at its center.
There you are. That circle is drawn at a radius of 10 miles from the village. The place we want must be somewhere within that line. You said 10 miles, I think, sir.
Yes, it was a good hour's drive.
And you think that they brought you back all that way while you were unconscious?
They must have. I have a confused memory of having been lifted and carried somewhere.
What I cannot understand is why they would have spared you when they found you lying in the garden. Perhaps the villain was softened by the woman's pleas.
I hardly think that likely. I never saw a more murderous face in all of my life.
Well, we'll have him soon. I've drawn my circle, and I only wish I knew at what point within it the people we are in search of might be found.
I think I could lay my finger on it.
Really now? You have formed your opinion? Come now, we shall see who agrees with you. I say it's south, for the country is more deserted there.
And I say east.
And I am for north, because there are no hills there, and our friend says that he did not notice the carriage go up any. Or perhaps it could be west. There are several little villages up there.
Well, that's a diversity of opinion. We fairly boxed in the compass. How do you cast your vote, Holmes?
You are all wrong.
But we can't all be.
Oh, yes, you can.
Holmes stabbed his finger at the exact center of the circle, just at Iford Station.
Here's my bet. This is where we shall find them.
But the 12-mile drive?
6 out and 6 back. Nothing simpler. You said yourself that the horse was fresh and glossy when you got in the carriage. How could that be if it had already gone 12 miles over rough roads?
Indeed, it's a likely enough ruse. Of course, there can be no doubt as to the nature of this game.
None whatsoever. They are coin counterfeiters on an industrial scale and have used their hydraulic press to stamp the amalgam which takes the place of silver in their fakes.
We've known for some time that a clever gang was at work. They've been turning out half-crowns by the thousand. Good fakes, too. We traced them as far as Reading, but no further. They had covered their tracks in a way that showed that they are true professionals. But now, thanks to this lucky chance, I think we've got them dead to rights.
But the inspector was mistaken, for those criminals were not destined to fall into the hands of justice. As we exited the train at Eyford Station, we saw a gigantic column of smoke which streamed up from behind a small clump of trees in the neighborhood and hung like an immense ostrich feather over the landscape. Bradstreet called over the station master.
A house on fire?
Yes, sir.
When did it break out?
I heard that it was during the night. But it's gotten worse and the whole place is in blaze.
Whose house is it?
Dr. Becher's.
Tell me, is Dr. Tallman very thin with a long, sharp nose?
No, sir. There isn't a fatter man in the parish, but he had a patient staying with him, and he looked as if a little Berkshire beef would do him good.
The station master had not finished his speech before we were all running in the direction of the fire. The road topped a low hill, and there was a great, widespread, whitewashed building in front of us, spouting fire from every window, while in the garden 3 fire engines strived vainly to keep the flames under control.
That's it! There's the gravel drive, and there are the rose bushes where I lay. That second window is the one that I jumped from.
Well, at least you have had your revenge upon them, Hatherley. There can be no doubt it was your oil lamp which set fire to the wooden walls when it was crushed by the press. No doubt they were too excited in chasing after you to notice it at the time. Now, keep your eyes open for your friends of last night, though I very much fear that they are 100 miles away by now, if not on their way to another country.
And Holmes' fears came to be realized. For from that day to this, no word has ever been heard of either the beautiful woman, the sinister colonel, or his morose secretary. Early that morning, a local farmer had seen a cart containing several people and some heavy boxes driving rapidly in the direction of Reading. But there the trail went cold, and even Holmes' ingenuity failed ever to discover the least clue as to their whereabouts. The firemen were much disturbed by the strange machinery they found within the ruined house, and still more so by the discovery of a newly severed and lightly charred human thumb on a windowsill of the second floor. Around sunset they subdued the flames, but not before the roof had fallen in, and the whole place had been reduced to such an absolute ruin that, except for some twisted cylinders and iron piping, no trace remained of the machinery which had cost our unfortunate Mr. Hatherley so dearly. Large masses of nickel and of tin were discovered in an outhouse on the property, but no coins were ever found, which may have explained the presence of the bulky boxes the criminals took with them as they made their escape. How our hydraulic engineer had been carried from the garden to the spot where he recovered consciousness might have remained a mystery, were it not for the soft earth, which told us a very plain tale. He had evidently been carried out by 2 people, one of whom had remarkably small feet, and the other unusually large ones. It was most probable that the silent secretary, being less bold and murderous than his companion, had assisted the woman to carry the unconscious engineer away from danger. Late that evening, discouraged by our failure, we started back by train to London.
Well, it has been a pretty awful business for me. I have lost my thumb, I've lost a £50 fee, and what have I gained?
Experience, my dear Hatherley, experience. And it's given you something else as well, of indirect but nearly equal value.
And what on earth might that be?
Well, my dear friend, with a story as interesting as yours, you need only put it into words to gain the universal reputation of being an excellent dinner guest for the remainder of your natural life.
And with that, we've come to the end of our tale. This is one of the very rare stories where the brilliant detective Sherlock Holmes fails to catch the perpetrators of a crime. The murderous Colonel Lysander Stark and the mysterious woman Elise disappear into the Victorian underworld with their boxes of counterfeit coins, never to be seen or heard from again in the files of Sherlock Holmes. Victor Hatherley returns to private practice, bearing the scars of his awful injury. At least he'll always have a story to tell. A story that we've thoroughly enjoyed presenting for you here on BeFM Drama. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and I recommend that you check out our 1-hour Sunday broadcast if you've missed any episodes this week or would like to experience this tale in a single, uninterrupted service.